Now that we've converted fractions to decimals, we're going to talk about converting decimals to fractions. First, let's talk about some terminology, some vocabulary. What is a terminating decimal? Well, a terminating decimal is a decimal's whose digits end. So when we divide 3 divided by 4, we get 0.75 with no remainder. So that's a terminating decimal. Now, a decimal that doesn't terminate may repeat. So think of 1/3. If you do 1 divided by 3, you're going to get 0.3333, which goes on forever. So what we do in that case, that's a repeating decimal, we're going to put our 0.3 as they've done here and put a bar over the repeating part. So if we had a decimal that when we divided it out, it was 0.292929 and kept going forever, we could write that out as 0.29 with a bar over the 2 and the 9 to indicate that those two numbers keep repeating. All right, so that's repeating. So we know how to convert fractions to decimals. We take our numerator divided by the denominator. How do we change decimals to their fraction equivalents? So to convert a terminating decimal into a fraction, you're going to put your decimal over 1. Okay? And then you're going to multiply the top and bottom by 10 until you get a whole number on top. In other words, we're going to be moving our decimals again, just like we did with dividing decimals. So for example, if I have 0.75, I'm going to put that number over 1. And then if I multiply this top number by 10, 0.75 times 10 is 7.5. If I do it on the top, I have to do it on the bottom. And I'll get 10 on the bottom. Well, I'm closer to having a whole number on the top now. So I'm going to multiply by 10 again. I'm going to have 75 on top and 100 on the bottom. So I'd have 75 out of 100. And when I divide by 25, that simplifies to 3/4. So that's how 3/4 comes from the decimal 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit more. Here's the same example. So you're going to write 0.75 as 0.75 over 1, and then you're going to multiply by 100. So I multiplied by 10 twice, and 10 times 10 is 100. So I multiplied by 100 in my example. If you multiply by 100, you'll get 75 on top and 100 on the bottom. Now you have a whole number as a numerator. That's what you need. Can't have any decimals in that numerator when it's completely simplified. And then we just have to simplify 75 over 100 down to 3/4. Okay, we're going to try a few. There's two ways now to convert decimals to fractions. One is by powers of 10, which we just did. We multiplied by 10, or you can multiply by 100, or you can multiply by 1,000. So those are powers of 10. The other way is to use proper math language. So let's talk about those two ways. If I have 0.625 and I want to change it to a fraction, I'm going to put my decimal over 1. Now, I need to move my decimal 1, 2, 3 times. So I'm going to multiply times 1,000 because it has 3 zeros. That means it will move my decimal to the right 3 times. So I'm going to multiply times 1,000 here, and I'm going to get 625 over 1,000. I know what you're saying. You're saying that is a really big fraction, and I'm not so sure that I can simplify that without doing a lot of work. Well, both of these can be divided by 25. So here's 125 here, and then there's 4 25s in every 100. So if I have 600 of those, I have to take 6 times 4. And that's going to be 24, plus one more 25 is 25. So now I can simplify this by dividing by 25 to 25 over, and then let's look at this first part is 100. If I were dividing 25 into 100, I would end up with a 4 here and no remainder and a 0, so 40. Now I can still divide by 5. So if I divide by 5, and this was divided by 25. If I divide by 5, I'm going to end up with 5 over 8, 5/8. Okay, so that's how you can change your decimal to a fraction using powers of 10. Now let's talk about it using proper math language. If I write 0.625 here, using proper math language, how do I say this number? Well, we're going to look at the place value that the last number occupies. So my last number is 5, and its place value is thousandths. Okay, so I would say this 625 thousandths. So in order to make my fraction, I'm going to take 625 over 1,000. You just use your math language to determine what number is going to go on the bottom of your fraction and make it a whole number on top. So 625 thousandths is the fraction 625 over 1,000. All right, and we would simplify it then the same way. All we did was use math language to get our original fraction instead of using powers of 10. Okay, and obviously this is going to simplify to 5/8 also. Okay, let's see how many more examples we have of this. Okay, here's a mixed number. I'm going to have you do this convert 46 hundredths to a fraction in simplest form on your own. Use both powers of 10 and math language. Here's a mixed number, 7 and 125 thousandths, and we're going to make this a mixed number. Now when we changed fractions to decimals, we set that whole number aside and just worked with the fraction. In changing decimals to fractions, once again, we're going to set the whole number aside. So we'll have 7 over here. And now I'm going to change 0.125 or 125 thousandths to a fraction. So I'm going to have 7 over here. I'm not going to lose that, but I'm only going to work with my decimal part to get a fraction, and then I'll put the 7 back. So 0.125, once again, 3 decimal places, so times 1,000, and that will be 7 and 125 over 1,000. And then we're going to simplify this. We're going to divide by 125, actually, and we'll end up with 7 and 1, not 1/18, 1/8. Okay, so if we divide by 125 on top and divide by 125 on the bottom, we'll get 7 and 1/8. Okay, now by using proper math language, we're still going to set aside the 7. And then we're going to say what this is in proper math language, mathematically. So we have 0.125. This is in the thousandths spot again, so 125 thousandths. So I have 7 and 125 thousandths up here. I also have 7 and 125 thousandths down here. And then I would simplify my fraction again and still end up with 7 and 1/8. That's how we would do a mixed number. I want you to do this one on your own. Just because it's a negative doesn't mean it's any different. This is -3 and 75 thousandths. I'm sorry, -2 and 375 thousandths. It doesn't matter that it's negative because you're setting aside the whole number and working only with the decimal. So just keep your whole number negative and work with the decimal and put the 2 back together at the end. All right. We are going to be taking a look at this a little bit more in class tomorrow to make sure you understand, or at least the next time we meet. And we will continue on with our assignments.